What if I told you that the very thing you're trying to avoid, pain, discomfort, and difficulty, is actually the key to unlocking a level of happiness and fulfillment you never thought possible? What if the reason you feel unmotivated, constantly distracted, and unable to stick to your goals isn't because you lack willpower, but because your brain has been hijacked by a chemical reward system that's working against you? Today, we're going to dive deep into one of the most powerful concepts in modern neuroscience and psychology, the dopamine detox. But this isn't just another self-help trend or productivity hack. This is about fundamentally rewiring your brain to find pleasure in the very things that used to feel impossible. Exercise, studying, creating, building meaningful relationships, and pursuing long-term goals. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how your brain's reward system works, why modern life has corrupted it, and most importantly, how you can reclaim control over your motivation, focus, and happiness. You'll learn the science-backed strategies to literally trick your brain into loving pain, difficulty, and delayed gratification. So if you've ever wondered why you can't seem to stick to good habits, why you procrastinate on important tasks, or why you feel addicted to your phone, social media, or other instant gratification behaviors, this video will give you the roadmap to break free and build the life you actually want. Let's start by understanding what's really happening inside your brain every single day. The hidden war inside your brain. Right now, as you're watching this video, there's an invisible war happening inside your brain. It's a battle between two competing systems that determine every choice you make, every habit you form, and ultimately, the entire trajectory of your life. On one side, you have the ancient survival system, the part of your brain that's been keeping humans alive for millions of years. This system is simple, powerful, and completely focused on immediate rewards. It wants food when you're hungry, rest when you're tired, and pleasure when you're stressed. It's the voice that says, "Eat the cookie now. Check your phone one more time or skip the gym today." On the other side, you have the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain. This is the part that can think about the future, delay gratification, and make decisions based on long-term goals rather than immediate impulses. It's the voice that says, stick to your diet, focus on your work, or go exercise even though you don't feel like it. Here's the problem. In the modern world, that ancient survival system has been weaponized against you. Every app on your phone, every streaming service, every social media platform, and every junk food company has teams of neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists working around the clock to hijack your brain's reward system. They're literally designing products to be as addictive as possible. And at the center of this war is a single molecule that controls your motivation, your focus, and your ability to feel pleasure. Dopamine. Most people think dopamine is the pleasure chemical, the thing that makes you feel good when you eat chocolate or get a like on social media. But that's not quite right. Dopamine isn't about pleasure itself. It's about the anticipation of pleasure. It's what drives you to seek rewards, to take action, and to repeat behaviors. Think about it this way. When you're scrolling through social media, the dopamine hit doesn't come when you see a funny meme. It comes in that split second before you see it, when your brain is anticipating that something interesting might be coming. That's why you keep scrolling. Your brain is constantly chasing that next potential reward. This system worked perfectly when we lived in caves and had to hunt for food or search for mates. But in a world where you can get instant gratification at any moment, a notification, a snack, a video, a purchase, this system becomes your worst enemy. Here's what happens when you give your brain easy, instant rewards all day long. Your dopamine baseline drops. Imagine dopamine as a bucket with holes in the bottom. Every time you get a reward, water pours into the bucket. But if you're constantly filling it with small, easy rewards, the holes get bigger and the bucket empties faster. Soon, you need more and more stimulation just to feel normal. This is why after a day of scrolling social media, binge-watching Netflix, and eating junk food, you feel empty, unmotivated, and unable to focus on anything meaningful. Your brain has been flooded with artificial dopamine hits, and now the things that actually matter. Exercise, creative work, deep relationships, learning new skills feel incredibly difficult and unrewarding. But here's the amazing thing. This process is completely reversible. You can reset your dopamine baseline, retrain your reward system, and literally rewire your brain to find pleasure in difficulty, growth, and delayed gratification. This is what a dopamine detox is really about. It's not about punishing yourself or living like a monk. It's about strategically removing artificial sources of dopamine, so your brain can remember how to find reward in the things that actually improve your life. The science of pleasure and pain. To understand how to fix your dopamine system, we need to dive deeper into one of the most important discoveries in modern neuroscience: the pleasure-pain balance. Your brain has a built-in mechanism that tries to keep you in a state of balance, or what scientists call homeostasis. When you experience pleasure, your brain automatically creates an equal and opposite amount of pain to bring you back to baseline. When you experience pain, your brain creates pleasure to compensate. This isn't just a metaphor. It's a real, measurable process happening in your brain right now. Dr. Anna Lem J., a Stanford psychiatrist and addiction specialist, describes this as a neurobiological seesaw. When you tip toward pleasure, the seesaw tips back toward pain. When you tip toward pain, it tips back toward pleasure. Here's the crucial part. The more intense the pleasure, the more intense the compensatory pain. And the faster you get the pleasure, the faster and more intense the pain that follows. Think about what happens when you eat a piece of chocolate cake. For a few minutes, you feel pleasure. But then what? You might feel guilt, regret, or that empty feeling that makes you want more. Your brain created pain to balance out the pleasure, and now you're actually worse off than when you started. This explains why people who chase instant gratification often end up feeling depressed, anxious, and unmotivated. They're caught in a cycle where each artificial pleasure high is followed by an artificial pain low, and they need more and more stimulation just to feel normal. But here's where it gets interesting. This same mechanism works in reverse. When you voluntarily expose yourself to mild discomfort or difficulty, your brain creates pleasure to compensate. And unlike artificial pleasures, this pleasure comes without a crash. This is why people who regularly exercise often describe feeling energized and happy afterward, even though exercise is literally stress on the body. It's why people who practice cold exposure, fasting, or other forms of voluntary discomfort often report feeling more resilient, focused, and content in their daily lives. The key word here is voluntary. When you choose to do something difficult, your brain interprets it differently than when difficulty is imposed on you. Choice activates your prefrontal cortex and gives you a sense of control, which changes how your entire nervous system responds to the challenge. Research shows that people who regularly engage in voluntary discomfort have higher levels of baseline happiness, better stress resilience, and greater ability to delay gratification. They've literally trained their brains to find reward in difficulty. This is backed up by studies on everything from cold water swimming to meditation to endurance sports. People who regularly challenge themselves with voluntary discomfort show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, better emotional regulation, and higher levels of neurotransmitters associated with well-being. But it's not just about individual activities. The principle applies to any area where you can choose difficulty over ease. Having a difficult conversation instead of avoiding it. Doing focused work instead of multitasking. Cooking a healthy meal instead of ordering takeout. Reading a challenging book instead of scrolling social media. Each time you choose the harder path, you're literally rewiring your brain to find reward in growth, challenge, and delayed gratification. You're teaching your dopamine system that effort and difficulty are pathways to genuine satisfaction. This is the foundation of what we'll call pain training, the practice of systematically exposing yourself to voluntary discomfort to reset your reward system and build mental resilience. Before we dive into solutions, let's take an honest look at the scope of the problem we're dealing with. The modern world has created what we might call a dopamine epidemic, a situation where our natural reward systems are being constantly overstimulated and dysregulated. Consider a typical day in the life of someone living in 2025. You wake up and immediately check your phone, getting a small hit of dopamine from notifications, messages, and social media updates. You scroll through endless feeds designed by algorithms to capture and hold your attention. You listen to music or podcasts while getting ready, watch videos while eating breakfast, and check your phone dozens of times throughout the day. Every few minutes, your brain is getting a small dose of artificial stimulation. Your reward system never gets a chance to reset to baseline. It's like having a sugar IV drip. Your system is constantly flooded with artificial rewards that require no effort, no skill, and no delayed gratification. But it goes beyond just technology. Our entire environment has been optimized for instant gratification. Fast food provides intense flavors with no preparation time. Online shopping gives you immediate access to anything you want. Streaming services offer unlimited entertainment with no waiting. Dating apps provide constant validation and the possibility of instant connection. Even our work and education systems have been infected by this instant gratification mindset. We expect immediate feedback, constant stimulation, and quick results. We've lost the ability to sit with boredom, to work on something for extended periods without external rewards, or to find satisfaction in the process rather than just the outcome. The statistics are staggering. The average person checks their phone 96 times per day. That's once every 10 minutes during waking hours. We spend over 7 hours a day looking at screens. Social media usage has increased by 70% in the past 2 years. And rates of anxiety, depression, and attention disorders have skyrocketed alongside our increased consumption of instant gratification. But here's what's really concerning. This isn't just affecting adults. Children who grow up in this hyper-stimulating environment are showing unprecedented levels of attention problems, emotional dysregulation, and inability to delay gratification. Their brains are being wired from birth to expect constant stimulation and immediate rewards. Dr. Peter Gray, a researcher who studies play and learning, has documented how children today have significantly less tolerance for boredom, difficulty, and delayed gratification compared to previous generations. They struggle to engage in unstructured play, to work on challenging tasks, and to find satisfaction in activities that don't provide immediate feedback. This creates a vicious cycle. The more we rely on external sources of stimulation and reward, the less capable we become of generating internal motivation and finding satisfaction in challenging, meaningful activities. We become dependent on artificial dopamine hits to feel normal, let alone happy. The business world has caught on to this too. There's an entire industry built around capturing and monetizing human attention. Social media companies hire neuroscientists to make their platforms more addictive. Game designers use variable reward schedules, the same psychological principles used in gambling, to keep players engaged. Even non-digital businesses use these principles. Loyalty programs, limited time offers, and gamification elements are all designed to hijack your dopamine system. The result is that many people find themselves in a state of constant low-level anxiety and dissatisfaction, always seeking the next hit of stimulation, but never feeling truly fulfilled. They struggle to focus on important tasks, to maintain motivation for long-term goals, and to find genuine pleasure in simple, non-stimulating activities. This is what we're up against when we talk about dopamine detox. We're not just trying to change a few bad habits. We're trying to reclaim our natural reward system from an entire culture and economy built on hijacking it. But the good news is that understanding the problem is the first step to solving it. Once you see how your environment is designed to dysregulate your dopamine system, you can start making conscious choices to protect and restore it. Now that you understand the science behind the problem, let's dive into the solution. A dopamine detox isn't about eliminating all pleasure from your life or living like a hermit. It's about strategically removing artificial sources of dopamine to reset your baseline and retrain your brain to find reward in meaningful activities. Think of it like cleaning your palate between courses at a fine restaurant. If you've been eating candy all day, you won't be able to taste the subtle flavors in a well-prepared meal. Similarly, if your brain has been flooded with artificial dopamine hits, you won't be able to appreciate the natural rewards that come from effort, growth, and genuine accomplishment. The dopamine detox protocol has 3 phases: the reset phase, the rebuilding phase, and the maintenance phase. Let's break down each one. Phase 1. The reset phase. The reset phase is about giving your dopamine system a chance to return to baseline. This means temporarily removing the most stimulating and immediately rewarding activities from your life. Here's what to eliminate during the first week: social media and endless scrolling. This includes Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, rabbit holes, and any other platforms designed to capture your attention with infinite feeds. The key is to avoid the dopamine hits that come from novelty and social validation. Entertainment media designed for binge consumption. This means Netflix, video games, podcasts during routine activities, and background music. The goal is to reduce passive consumption and constant mental stimulation. Instant gratification shopping. No online shopping, impulse purchases, or browsing e-commerce sites. This helps break the cycle of seeking pleasure through acquisition. Processed foods and artificial flavors. Stick to whole foods and simple preparations. This helps reset your taste buds and reduces the dopamine hits that come from engineered flavors. Pornography and casual sexual stimulation. This is one of the most potent sources of artificial dopamine and can significantly impact your motivation and reward sensitivity. Multitasking and tasks. Witching. Focus on doing one thing at a time without background entertainment or distractions. This helps rebuild your ability to find reward in sustained attention. During this phase, you might experience what feels like withdrawal symptoms. You might feel bored, restless, anxious, or unmotivated. This is completely normal and actually a good sign. It means your brain is starting to readjust to lower levels of artificial stimulation. Instead of fighting these feelings, use them as opportunities to practice sitting with discomfort. Notice the urge to check your phone or seek stimulation, but don't act on it. This is like doing bicep curls for your willpower. Each time you resist an impulse, you're strengthening your prefrontal cortex. Phase 2. The rebuilding phase. Once you've completed the initial reset, it's time to start rebuilding your reward system around activities that provide genuine long-term satisfaction. This phase is about training your brain to find pleasure in effort, growth, and delayed gratification. Start with movement and physical challenge. Exercise is one of the most reliable ways to generate natural dopamine and endorphins. But don't just choose easy activities. Lean into some discomfort. Try high-intensity interval training, strength training, or endurance activities that push you outside your comfort zone. Engage in creative and productive work. Choose activities that require focus, skill development, and delayed gratification. This could be writing, learning a musical instrument, coding, drawing, building something with your hands, or working on a meaningful project. The key is choosing activities where the reward comes from the process and improvement, not just the outcome. Practice deliberate learning. Instead of consuming information passively, engage in active learning that requires effort and concentration. Read challenging books. Take online courses that require homework. Learn a new language or study a subject that interests you. Make sure to remove all distractions and focus completely on the material. Build deeper relationships. Invest time in face-to-face conversations, phone calls without multitasking, and activities that require presence and attention. Practice active listening and genuine interest in others. This helps retrain your brain to find reward in human connection rather than digital validation. Incorporate voluntary discomfort practices. This is where the pain training really begins. Start small with things like cold showers, intermittent fasting, meditation, or other practices that involve choosing discomfort for long-term benefit. The key is starting with manageable challenges and gradually increasing the difficulty. Develop routines that don't rely on external rewards. Create morning and evening routines that help you feel accomplished and centered without needing external validation or stimulation. This might include journaling, stretching, planning your day, or other simple but meaningful activities. During this phase, you should start to notice your capacity for focus and sustained attention improving. Tasks that used to feel impossible or boring will start to feel more manageable and even enjoyable. You'll begin to experience what researchers call intrinsic motivation, the satisfaction that comes from engaging in activities for their own sake, rather than for external rewards. Phase 3. The maintenance phase. The maintenance phase is about finding a sustainable balance that allows you to enjoy the benefits of technology and modern conveniences without falling back into dysregulated dopamine patterns. This isn't about permanent restriction. It's about conscious consumption and maintaining your reward sensitivity. Implement scheduled consumption windows. Instead of completely avoiding social media or entertainment, designate specific times when you engage with these activities. For example, you might check social media for 30 minutes after completing your most important task of the day, or watch one episode of a show after finishing your exercise routine. Use technology tools to support your goals rather than distract from them. This might mean using apps for meditation, learning, or fitness tracking, while avoiding apps designed purely for entertainment or social validation. Regular mini detoxes. Consider doing shorter dopamine detoxes on a regular basis, perhaps one day a week or a few days each month. This helps maintain your reward sensitivity and prevents you from gradually sliding back into old patterns. Continue challenging yourself with voluntary discomfort. Make this a permanent part of your lifestyle by regularly engaging in activities that push you outside your comfort zone. This keeps your brain plastic and maintains your tolerance for difficulty and delayed gratification. Practice mindful consumption. When you do choose to engage with highly stimulating activities, do so consciously and with full attention. Notice how they affect your mood, motivation, and ability to focus on other activities. The goal of the maintenance phase isn't to live in permanent restriction, but to maintain conscious control over your reward system. You want to be the one deciding when and how to engage with different types of stimulation rather than being unconsciously driven by impulses and cravings. One of the most counterintuitive aspects of dopamine detox is the concept of voluntary suffering, deliberately choosing discomfort for psychological and neurological benefits. This isn't about being masochistic or punishing yourself. It's about understanding that there's a fundamental difference between chosen difficulty and imposed difficulty, and that this difference can completely transform your relationship with challenges. When you voluntarily choose to do something difficult, whether it's taking a cold shower, doing a challenging workout, or working on a complex project, your brain interprets this very differently than when difficulty is imposed on you. Choice activates your prefrontal cortex and gives you a sense of agency and control. It changes your entire physiological response to stress. Research in psychology shows that people who have a sense of control over stressful situations show lower cortisol levels, better immune function, and greater emotional resilience compared to those who experience the same stressors without choice. This is why people can enjoy intense physical activities like rock climbing or marathon running, while finding much less intense but involuntary stressors incredibly draining. The key insight is that your perception of control over a situation is often more important than the situation itself. When you frame discomfort as something you're choosing for a purpose, rather than something happening to you, you activate completely different neural pathways and emotional responses. This principle has profound implications for building mental toughness and resilience. Every time you voluntarily choose something difficult, you're literally proving to yourself that you can handle discomfort. You're building what psychologists call self-efficacy. the belief in your ability to cope with challenges and achieve your goals. Dr. Kelly McGonigal, a health psychologist at Stanford, has extensively researched how changing your mindset about stress can change its effects on your body. She found that people who view stress as helpful rather than harmful show improved cardiovascular function, better performance, and less anxiety in stressful situations. The same principle applies to voluntary discomfort. When you reframe pain as growth, challenge as opportunity, and difficulty as strength training, your entire experience changes. But there's another crucial aspect of voluntary suffering that goes beyond individual psychology. It connects you to a deeper sense of purpose and meaning. Throughout history, every culture has recognized that meaningful achievements require sacrifice. That growth requires discomfort, and that the most fulfilling experiences often come through overcoming obstacles. Modern culture has tried to convince us that we can have everything we want without any discomfort or delay. But this promise is not only false, it's actually counterproductive. Research consistently shows that people who regularly challenge themselves and overcome difficulties report higher levels of life satisfaction, stronger sense of identity, and greater resilience in the face of setbacks. This is why successful athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, and leaders often describe loving the process of training, practice, and improvement, even when it's difficult. They've learned to find pleasure in the pursuit of mastery rather than just in achievements. They've literally rewired their brains to experience challenge as reward. The practical application of this is learning to reframe every difficult task or uncomfortable experience as an opportunity to build strength. When you're doing a difficult workout, instead of focusing on how much it hurts, focus on how much stronger you're becoming. When you're working on a challenging project, instead of focusing on how hard it is, focus on how much you're learning and growing. This isn't just positive thinking or self-deception. It's based on real neurological changes that occur when you consistently choose difficulty over ease. Studies using brain imaging show that people who regularly engage in challenging activities develop greater gray matter density in areas associated with learning, memory, and emotional regulation. The ancient Greeks had a concept called eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but really meaning something closer to human flourishing. They understood that true fulfillment comes not from pleasure or comfort, but from actualizing your potential through effort, virtue, and overcoming challenges. Modern research in positive psychology has validated this ancient wisdom. People who report the highest levels of life satisfaction are not those who experience the most pleasure, but those who regularly engage in activities that are challenging, meaningful, and aligned with their values, even when these activities are difficult or uncomfortable. This is the deeper purpose of dopamine detox and pain training. It's not just about improving your focus or breaking bad habits. It's about reconnecting with your capacity for growth, resilience, and genuine achievement. It's about remembering that you're capable of far more than you think, and that the path to that capability runs directly through voluntary discomfort. Practical pain training techniques. Now, let's get into the specific techniques you can use to train your brain to embrace discomfort and reset your dopamine system. These practices range from simple, daily habits to more intensive challenges, all designed to build your tolerance for difficulty and strengthen your mental resilience. Cold exposure is one of the most accessible and effective forms of voluntary discomfort. The practice involves deliberately exposing yourself to cold temperatures through cold showers, ice baths, or cold water swimming. This might sound extreme, but even 30 seconds of cold water at the end of your regular shower can have significant benefits. When you expose yourself to cold, several important things happen in your brain and body. First, your sympathetic nervous system activates, releasing norepinephrine and dopamine. But unlike artificial dopamine hits, this release comes after overcoming a challenge, which reinforces your ability to handle discomfort. Cold exposure also activates brown adipose tissue, which burns calories and improves metabolic health. It increases production of norepinephrine, which improves focus and attention. and it triggers the release of endorphins, creating a natural high that lasts for hours after the exposure. But the most important benefit is psychological. Every time you choose to step into cold water despite your brain screaming at you to avoid it, you're practicing overriding your immediate impulses in favor of long-term benefits. You're literally training your prefrontal cortex to control your limbic system. Start with just 15 to 30 seconds of cold water at the end of your regular shower. Focus on controlling your breathing and staying calm despite the discomfort. Gradually increase the duration as you build tolerance. The key is consistency rather than intensity. Doing this daily for a week will have more benefits than doing it once for a longer period. While any exercise is beneficial, certain types of training are particularly effective for building mental toughness and resetting your reward system. High-intensity interval training, strength training with challenging weights, and endurance activities all provide opportunities to practice pushing through discomfort. The key is to occasionally push yourself beyond what feels comfortable. This doesn't mean injuring yourself or ignoring safety, but it means experiencing that voice in your head that says, "This is too hard," and choosing to continue anyway. During challenging workouts, practice specific mental techniques. Focus on your breathing. Break the challenge down into smaller segments. Use positive self-talk and remind yourself of your goals. These same techniques will serve you in every other area where you need to push through difficulty. Meditation is perhaps the ultimate form of voluntary discomfort for modern minds. It requires you to sit still, focus your attention, and resist the constant urge to seek stimulation or distraction. This directly counters the hyperactivity and instant gratification patterns that dysregulate your dopamine system. Start with just 5 to 10 minutes of daily meditation. Choose a simple technique like focusing on your breath or repeating a mantra. When your mind wanders, and it will, gently bring your attention back to your focus point. This process of noticing distraction and returning to focus is like doing repetitions for your attention muscle. The discomfort in meditation isn't physical pain. It's the psychological discomfort of boredom, restlessness, and the desire for stimulation. Learning to sit with these feelings without acting on them is incredibly valuable training for every other area of your life. Intermittent fasting involves voluntarily restricting your eating to specific time windows, creating periods where you experience mild hunger and resist the immediate impulse to eat. This practice has numerous physical health benefits, but it's also excellent training for impulse control and delayed gratification. Start with a simple 16-8 protocol, eating within an 8-hour window and fasting for 16 hours. Most people find it easiest to skip breakfast and eat between noon and 8 p.m. During the fasting period, you'll experience hunger and the desire to eat. But you practice sitting with these sensations rather than immediately acting on them. This teaches you the crucial skill of distinguishing between genuine needs and habitual impulses. Most of what we interpret as hunger is actually just routine, boredom, or the desire for oral stimulation. Learning to recognize and resist these false signals builds tremendous self-control. Since technology is one of the primary sources of dopamine dysregulation, creating specific challenges around digital usage can be incredibly effective. These might include phone-free mornings, social media fasts, or single-tasking challenges. Try implementing a digital sunset where you turn off all screens 1 to 2 hours before bed. This creates a period of potential boredom and restlessness that you practice sitting with rather than filling with stimulation. Use this time for reading, journaling, gentle stretching, or preparation for the next day. Another effective practice is the phone in another room challenge. When you're working, studying, or spending time with others, physically remove your phone from easy reach. Notice the urges to check it and practice resisting these impulses. Engaging in activities that require sustained focus and skill development is excellent training for your reward system. Choose something that's genuinely challenging for you. Learning a musical instrument, a new language, drawing, writing, or any skill that requires practice and patience. The key is to choose activities where progress is slow and requires sustained effort. This is the opposite of the instant gratification that dysregulates your dopamine system. Instead, you're training your brain to find reward in the process of gradual improvement. Set specific practice schedules and stick to them even when you don't feel motivated. This builds the crucial skill of acting based on commitment rather than mood or impulse. Good sleep is fundamental to healthy dopamine function, but creating optimal sleep conditions often requires some short-term discomfort. This might mean going to bed earlier than you'd prefer, keeping your bedroom cooler than feels immediately comfortable, or avoiding screens when you'd rather be entertained. Create a consistent sleep schedule and stick to it even on weekends. This means sometimes choosing to go to bed when you'd rather stay up, and getting up at the same time even when you'd prefer to sleep in. This type of self-discipline in service of long-term health is excellent practice for choosing difficulty over ease. Many of our dopamine-seeking behaviors are actually ways of avoiding social discomfort or rejection. Practice deliberately engaging in mildly uncomfortable social situations, starting conversations with strangers, expressing disagreement respectfully, asking for what you need, or setting boundaries with others. The goal isn't to be unnecessarily confrontational, but to build your tolerance for the discomfort that comes with authentic human interaction. This reduces your reliance on digital validation and helps you develop genuine confidence and social skills. The key to all these practices is progressive overload. It's gradually increasing the difficulty as your tolerance builds. Just like physical training, you want to challenge yourself just beyond your current comfort zone without overwhelming your system. Start with practices that feel manageable but slightly uncomfortable. As they become easier, either increase the intensity, duration, or frequency. The goal is to always have some element of challenge in your routine while building sustainable habits. Remember, the purpose of these practices isn't to suffer for the sake of suffering. It's to build your capacity to choose long-term benefit over short-term comfort, to develop confidence in your ability to handle challenges, and to reset your reward system so you can find genuine satisfaction in meaningful activities. Understanding how habits form and change in your brain is crucial for successfully implementing a dopamine detox and building new patterns of behavior. The process isn't just about willpower or motivation. It's about working with your brain's natural learning mechanisms to create lasting change. Every habit follows the same basic neurological pattern, known as the habit loop. This loop consists of three components: a cue, which is the trigger, a routine, which is the behavior, and a reward, which is the benefit. Your brain learns to associate these three elements so strongly that eventually, the cue alone triggers an almost automatic response. Here's what happens in your brain during habit formation. When you first perform a new behavior, your prefrontal cortex is highly active, consciously directing your actions. But as you repeat the behavior in response to the same cue and receive the same reward, your brain starts to automate the process. The activity shifts from the prefrontal cortex to deeper brain structures called the basal ganglia. This is actually a brilliant evolutionary adaptation. Your brain is essentially saying, this person keeps doing this same sequence of actions in this situation and getting a positive result, so I'll automate it to save mental energy. The behavior becomes so automatic that you can perform it without conscious thought. This is why habits can feel so difficult to change once they're established. The neural pathways in your basal ganglia have become deeply grooved, like water carving channels in rock, over time. Your brain defaults to these automatic patterns unless your prefrontal cortex actively intervenes. But here's the encouraging part. Your brain remains plastic throughout your entire life. You can literally rewire these neural pathways by consistently choosing different responses to the same cues. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, and it's the foundation of all learning and change. The key insight is that you rarely break habits. You replace them. The cue and the craving remain, but you substitute a different routine that provides a similar reward. This is why trying to simply eliminate a habit through willpower alone is so difficult. You're fighting against deeply ingrained neural patterns without providing an alternative pathway. Let's apply this to dopamine detox. Instead of just trying to stop checking social media, you need to identify what cue triggers the behavior. Boredom, stress, transition between activities. What reward you're seeking. Stimulation, social connection, distraction. And what alternative routine could provide a similar reward? For example, if you typically check your phone when you feel bored, you might replace this with doing push-ups, calling a friend, or working on a creative project. The key is choosing an alternative that provides some form of reward, preferably one that aligns with your long-term goals. The neuroscience research also reveals important insights about timing and consistency. Your brain learns patterns through repetition, but the timing of that repetition matters enormously. Consistent daily practice creates stronger neural pathways than sporadic, intense efforts. This is why it's better to do 10 minutes of meditation every day for a month than to do one 5-hour meditation retreat. Your brain learns from repeated exposure to the same pattern, and daily repetition creates stronger associations than occasional intensive practice. The research on habit formation shows that it typically takes between 18 and 254 days for a new behavior to become automatic, with an average of about 66 days. The exact timing depends on the complexity of the behavior and individual differences. But the key principle is that consistency matters more than intensity. This has important implications for how you approach dopamine detox. Rather than trying to completely overhaul your life overnight, focus on changing 1 or 2 specific habits at a time. Give each new habit time to become automatic before adding additional challenges. Another crucial insight from neuroscience is the role of environmental design in habit formation. Your environment provides constant cues that trigger habitual responses. If you want to change your habits, you need to change your environment. This might mean removing apps from your phone, reorganizing your living space, or changing your daily routines to avoid cues that trigger unwanted behaviors. The goal is to make good choices easier and bad choices harder by designing your environment to support your goals. The research also shows that stress and decision fatigue can cause people to revert to old habits, even when they've been successfully practicing new ones. This is why having backup plans and stress management strategies is so important when you're trying to establish new patterns. Your brain has limited cognitive resources, and when these are depleted through stress, difficult decisions, or mental fatigue, you're more likely to fall back on automatic behaviors. This is why people often break their diets when they're stressed, or why you might find yourself scrolling social media after a difficult day, even when you've been successfully avoiding it. The solution isn't to have perfect willpower. It's to design systems that don't rely heavily on willpower. This means creating environmental cues that make good choices automatic, having predetermined responses to common challenges, and building recovery protocols for when you do slip up. One of the most powerful findings in habit research is the concept of implementation intentions. Specific if-then plans that connect situational cues to desired behaviors. Instead of vague goals, like "I want to exercise more," you create specific plans, like if it's 7 a.m. on a weekday, then I will do 20 push-ups before checking my phone. These implementation intentions work because they pre-decide your behavior in specific situations, reducing the cognitive load required in the moment. Your prefrontal cortex doesn't have to make a decision. It just follows the predetermined plan. This is particularly powerful for dopamine detox because many of the behaviors you're trying to change happen automatically in response to specific cues. By creating implementation intentions, you can interrupt these automatic patterns and substitute more beneficial behaviors. The neuroscience research also reveals the importance of identity-based habit change. Your brain is constantly trying to maintain consistency with your self-concept. If you see yourself as someone who is disciplined, your brain will look for evidence to support this identity and make choices that reinforce it. This is why focusing on identity change can be more effective than focusing on behavior change alone. Instead of just trying to meditate daily, start seeing yourself as someone who prioritizes mental clarity and inner peace. Instead of just trying to avoid social media, start seeing yourself as someone who values deep focus and meaningful relationships. Every small action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. Each time you choose difficulty over ease, delayed gratification over instant pleasure, or presence over distraction, you're reinforcing a stronger, more disciplined identity that makes future good choices easier. Mental resilience isn't just about bouncing back from setbacks. It's about developing an unshakable inner strength that allows you to thrive in the face of any challenge. This quality is perhaps the most valuable benefit of dopamine detox and pain training, because it affects every area of your life. Resilient people aren't those who never face difficulties or setbacks. They're the ones who have trained themselves to respond to challenges with curiosity rather than fear, with action rather than paralysis, and with growth mindset rather than fixed thinking. The neuroscience research shows that resilience is built through a process called stress inoculation. Just like vaccines expose your immune system to small amounts of pathogens to build immunity, exposing yourself to manageable amounts of stress and discomfort builds psychological immunity to larger challenges. Each time you voluntarily choose something difficult and successfully complete it, you're literally rewiring your brain to be more confident in your ability to handle future challenges. You're building what psychologists call mastery experiences, memories of successfully overcoming obstacles that your brain can reference when facing new difficulties. But resilience isn't just about individual experiences. It's about developing systematic ways of thinking and responding that serve you in any situation. Let's explore the key components of unshakable mental resilience. Cognitive flexibility. Resilient people have learned to see challenges from multiple perspectives and to adapt their thinking when circumstances change. They don't get locked into rigid ways of viewing problems, and they can quickly shift strategies when their initial approach isn't working. This cognitive flexibility is built through deliberately exposing yourself to new experiences, learning new skills, and practicing looking at problems from different angles. When you regularly challenge yourself with unfamiliar activities, you're training your brain to be comfortable with uncertainty and change. During your dopamine detox, practice approaching problems with curiosity rather than frustration. When something feels difficult or impossible, ask yourself, what's another way I could think about this? Or, what would someone who's good at this do differently? This builds the mental flexibility that serves you in every challenging situation. Emotional regulation. Resilience requires the ability to experience difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It means developing the skill to feel emotions fully, while still being able to think clearly and make good decisions. The practice of voluntary discomfort is excellent training for emotional regulation because it teaches you to separate the sensation of discomfort from your emotional reaction to it. When you're taking a cold shower or doing a difficult workout, you learn to experience physical discomfort without adding layers of mental resistance or emotional drama. This same skill applies to emotional challenges. You can feel disappointed, frustrated, or anxious, while still maintaining your ability to think clearly and take constructive action. The emotion becomes information rather than control. Practice labeling your emotions specifically rather than using general terms like bad or stressed. Research shows that the simple act of putting precise words to your feelings activates your prefrontal cortex and reduces the intensity of negative emotions. Growth mindset, perhaps the most important component of resilience, is what Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck calls growth mindset. The belief that your abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and learning rather than being fixed traits. People with growth mindset see failures as learning opportunities, view challenges as chances to improve, and believe that effort is the path to mastery. This mindset makes them incredibly resilient, because setbacks become fuel for growth rather than evidence of inadequacy. During your dopamine detox and pain training, deliberately frame every challenge as an opportunity to grow stronger. When something feels difficult, remind yourself that difficulty is the price of admission to capability. When you make mistakes, focus on what you can learn rather than judging yourself. Purpose and meaning. Resilient people have a clear sense of purpose that goes beyond their immediate comfort or pleasure. This sense of meaning provides motivation to persist through difficulties and gives context to temporary setbacks. Your dopamine detox isn't just about breaking bad habits. It's about reclaiming your agency, developing your potential, and building the capacity to contribute meaningfully to the world. When you connect your daily practices to larger purposes, they become much easier to maintain. Spend time clarifying your values and long-term vision. What kind of person do you want to become? What do you want to contribute to the world? How do your current challenges and practices serve these larger goals? Having clear answers to these questions provides incredible motivation during difficult times. Social connection. While building individual resilience is important, humans are fundamentally social creatures, and our resilience is greatly enhanced by strong relationships and community support. This is why isolation often leads to depression, and why people with strong social connections recover more quickly from setbacks. However, not all social connections are equally beneficial for resilience. The most valuable relationships are those that challenge you to grow, support your goals, and provide honest feedback rather than just comfort or validation. During your dopamine detox, invest time in building deeper relationships with people who share your values and aspirations. This might mean having meaningful conversations instead of surface-level socializing, asking for support with your goals, or finding communities of people who are also committed to growth and self-improvement. Physical foundation. Mental resilience is built on a foundation of physical health. Your brain is an organ that depends on proper nutrition, adequate sleep, regular movement, and stress management to function optimally. Neglecting your physical health makes everything else more difficult. This is why the physical practices in dopamine detox, exercise, cold exposure, proper sleep, good nutrition, aren't just about physical health. They're about building the biological foundation that supports mental resilience, emotional stability, and cognitive performance. Treat your body as the vehicle for your goals and dreams. Invest in its maintenance and optimization, not just for health, but for the mental clarity and emotional stability that make everything else possible. Systems thinking, highly resilient people understand that life is made up of systems and processes rather than isolated events. They focus on building sustainable practices rather than relying on motivation or perfect circumstances. This means creating routines, habits, and environmental designs that support your goals regardless of how you feel on any given day. It means having backup plans for when things don't go as expected, and recovery protocols for when you experience setbacks. View your dopamine detox and pain training as part of a larger system for optimizing your life rather than temporary challenges to endure. Build sustainable practices that you can maintain long-term rather than extreme measures that require constant willpower. The goal is to develop such strong systems and practices that resilience becomes automatic. You want to reach a point where choosing difficulty over ease, growth over comfort, and long-term benefit over short-term pleasure becomes your default response to life's challenges. Advanced strategies for dopamine optimization. Once you've mastered the basics of dopamine detox and built a foundation of mental resilience, you can begin implementing more advanced strategies for optimizing your brain's reward system. These techniques go beyond simply avoiding harmful stimuli and focus on actively enhancing your natural dopamine production and sensitivity. One of the most sophisticated approaches to dopamine optimization involves what we might call strategic scheduling, deliberately timing your exposure to different types of rewards to maximize their benefit and minimize tolerance buildup. The key insight is that dopamine sensitivity follows certain patterns throughout the day and responds differently to various types of stimuli, depending on when they're experienced. By understanding these patterns, you can design your daily schedule to optimize motivation, focus, and satisfaction. For example, your dopamine system is naturally most sensitive in the morning after a good night's sleep. This is the ideal time to engage in your most important or challenging work, as your brain is primed to find reward in effort and accomplishment. Consuming artificial dopamine hits, social media, entertainment, sugary foods. During this peak sensitivity period essentially wastes your most valuable neurochemical resources. Instead, save lower-level dopamine activities for later in the day when your baseline has naturally decreased. This might mean checking social media only after completing your most important work, or watching entertainment only after you've engaged in physical exercise and meaningful activities. Research also shows that intermittent and unpredictable rewards create stronger dopamine responses than constant or predictable ones. You can use this principle by varying your reward schedule rather than giving yourself the same rewards at the same times every day. For instance, instead of always treating yourself to your favorite coffee after a workout, sometimes reward yourself immediately. Sometimes wait until later in the day, and sometimes skip the reward entirely. This unpredictability keeps your dopamine system responsive and prevents tolerance from building up. Advanced practitioners often use a technique called compound habit stacking, where they link multiple beneficial behaviors together in sequences that create cascading dopamine rewards. This approach leverages the neurological principle that completing one positive behavior primes your brain to find the next behavior more rewarding. A compound habit stack might look like this. Wake up at the same time, make your bed, do 10 minutes of meditation. Write in a journal, do 20 push-ups, and then have your first cup of coffee. Each completed behavior provides a small sense of accomplishment that makes the next behavior feel more rewarding and easier to complete. The key is starting with very simple behaviors that require minimal willpower and gradually building complexity. The morning bed making might seem trivial, but it provides an immediate sense of order and accomplishment that sets a positive tone for everything that follows. Over time, these stacked behaviors become neurologically linked so that completing one automatically triggers the desire to complete the next. You've essentially created a positive addiction. It's a series of behaviors that your brain craves because they consistently provide reward and satisfaction. Your physical environment constantly influences your dopamine system through visual cues, organizational systems, and accessibility of different options. Advanced practitioners deliberately design their environments to make beneficial choices easier and harmful choices harder. This goes beyond simply removing temptations. It involves creating environmental cues that automatically trigger desired behaviors and designing spaces that support focus, creativity, and meaningful activity. For example, you might set up a specific area of your home dedicated to focused work. With all the tools and materials you need, easily accessible, and all potential distractions removed. Over time, simply entering this space triggers a mental state of focus and productivity, because your brain has learned to associate the environment with these activities. Similarly, you might organize your kitchen to make healthy eating choices more convenient and visible, while making processed foods less accessible. Or you might create a morning routine area with everything needed for meditation, journaling, and exercise setup and ready to use. The principle is to reduce the number of decisions and the amount of willpower required to engage in beneficial behaviors. When good choices are obvious, easy, and immediately accessible, they become much more likely to happen consistently. Advanced dopamine optimization also involves understanding and optimizing the biochemical factors that influence your brain's reward system. This includes nutrition, supplementation, sleep optimization, and lifestyle factors that directly affect neurotransmitter production and sensitivity. Certain nutrients are essential for dopamine production. Tyrosine, found in foods like almonds, avocados, and lean meats, is a direct precursor to dopamine. Iron, folate, and B6 are cofactors required for dopamine synthesis. Omega-3 fatty acids support overall brain health and neurotransmitter function. However, the timing and context of nutrition can be as important as the nutrients themselves. Eating protein-rich foods earlier in the day supports dopamine production, when you need it most for focus and motivation. Avoiding large meals or high-sugar foods before important tasks prevents the blood sugar crashes that can impair dopamine function. Sleep optimization is perhaps the most critical factor for dopamine health. Poor sleep dramatically reduces dopamine receptor sensitivity and impairs your brain's ability to find reward in beneficial activities. Advanced practitioners often track their sleep quality and experiment with different sleep schedules, environments, and pre-sleep routines to optimize their dopamine function. MICRO challenge integration. Instead of relying on large, dramatic challenges to build mental resilience, advanced practitioners integrate small micro-challenges throughout their daily routine. These are brief moments of voluntary discomfort that continuously strengthen their tolerance for difficulty without requiring significant time or planning. Examples might include taking the stairs instead of the elevator, parking farther away from destinations, doing a few extra repetitions during exercise, or choosing to stand instead of sit during phone calls. Individually, these choices are minor, but cumulatively, they build tremendous mental toughness and reinforce your identity as someone who chooses difficulty over ease. The power of micro-challenges is that they're sustainable and can be integrated into any lifestyle. They don't require special equipment, significant time, or dramatic lifestyle changes. Yet, they provide constant reinforcement of your ability to override immediate impulses in favor of long-term benefits. As we near the end of our journey through dopamine, detox, and pain training, it's important to understand that these practices are not just techniques or life hacks. They're part of a larger philosophy of what it means to live an optimal human life in the modern world. Throughout history, every culture that has produced remarkable achievements and deep wisdom has understood certain fundamental principles about human nature and flourishing. They've recognized that meaning comes through challenge, that strength comes through struggle, and that the most satisfying pleasures are those that are earned through effort and sacrifice. The ancient Greeks spoke of arete, excellence of character that comes through the cultivation of virtue and the disciplined pursuit of human potential. The Stoics taught that happiness comes not from external circumstances, but from our response to those circumstances, and that we become stronger by voluntarily exposing ourselves to difficulty. Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Taoism have long understood that suffering is an inherent part of life, and that attempting to avoid all discomfort actually increases our suffering. They teach that peace and contentment come through accepting difficulty and finding meaning in the process of growth and self-improvement. What's remarkable is that modern neuroscience has validated these ancient insights. We now understand the biological mechanisms behind why voluntary challenge leads to resilience, why delayed gratification creates deeper satisfaction, and why meaning and purpose are more powerful motivators than pleasure and comfort. But we live in a culture that has largely abandoned these principles. We've been sold the idea that technology can eliminate all inconvenience, that we should never have to wait for what we want, and that any discomfort is a problem to be solved, rather than an opportunity to grow stronger. This cultural shift isn't just making us less resilient, it's making us less human. We're losing touch with our capacity for growth, our tolerance for challenge, and our ability to find deep satisfaction in meaningful activities. Dopamine detox and pain training are ways of reclaiming these fundamental human capacities. They're about remembering that you're capable of far more than your current circumstances might suggest, and that the path to that capability runs directly through voluntary discomfort and delayed gratification. But this isn't about returning to some idealized past or rejecting all the benefits of modern life. It's about consciously choosing which aspects of modernity serve your growth and which ones undermine it. It's about using technology as a tool for your goals rather than being used by it. The philosophy of optimal living recognizes that humans have certain universal needs that haven't changed. Despite technological progress, we need challenge to grow. We need meaningful work to feel fulfilled. We need genuine relationships to thrive. And we need purpose beyond our immediate comfort to find lasting satisfaction. These needs can't be met through passive consumption or instant gratification. They require active engagement, patient effort, and the willingness to experience discomfort in service of growth. This doesn't mean that all discomfort is valuable or that struggle is inherently good. The key distinction is between chosen difficulty that serves your growth and imposed suffering that doesn't lead anywhere productive. The goal is to become someone who can distinguish between these types of discomfort and who has the strength to choose growth even when it's challenging. Living optimally also means understanding that happiness isn't the absence of problems. It's the presence of meaningful challenges that you have the capacity to handle. It's not about avoiding all stress, but about building your ability to respond to stress with wisdom, courage, and effectiveness. This perspective completely changes how you approach difficulties in your life. Instead of seeing challenges as obstacles to your happiness, you begin to see them as opportunities to develop your capabilities. Instead of avoiding discomfort, you begin to seek out the types of discomfort that make you stronger. The ultimate goal of dopamine detox and pain training isn't to become someone who never experiences pleasure or enjoys life. It's to become someone whose pleasure and enjoyment are deeper, more sustainable, and more aligned with your authentic values and long-term well-being. When you've reset your reward system and built genuine resilience, simple pleasures become more intense and satisfying. A good meal tastes better when you've earned it through effort. Rest feels more refreshing when you've accomplished meaningful work. Relationships become deeper when they're built on presence and authenticity rather than digital validation. You begin to experience what philosophers have called eudaimonic well-being. Happiness that comes from living in accordance with your highest values and actualizing your potential as a human being. This is qualitatively different from hedonic pleasure, which is based on consuming external rewards. Eudaimonic well-being is more stable, more meaningful, and more sustainable than pleasure-based happiness. It doesn't require constant external stimulation or validation. It grows stronger over time rather than requiring ever-increasing levels of stimulation. This is the promise of optimal living. Not a life without challenges or discomfort, but a life where you have the strength, wisdom, and resilience to transform any challenge into an opportunity for growth. A life where your happiness comes from who you're becoming rather than what you're consuming. Understanding the principles of dopamine optimization is one thing, but successfully integrating them into your daily life and maintaining them over the long term is another challenge entirely. This final section focuses on the practical strategies for making these changes permanent and continuing to grow throughout your journey. True integration happens gradually, not through dramatic overnight changes. Your brain needs time to adapt to new patterns, and your life circumstances need to adjust to support your new behaviors. Trying to change everything at once often leads to overwhelm and eventual regression to old patterns. Instead, focus on what researchers call minimum effective dose, the smallest amount of change that produces meaningful results. This might mean starting with just one 30-second cold shower each day, or spending 10 minutes each morning without checking your phone, or doing 5 push-ups after each meal. The key is consistency over intensity. Your brain learns through repetition, and daily practice creates stronger neural pathways than sporadic, intense efforts. It's better to do something small every day for a month than something dramatic once a week. As each new behavior becomes automatic, you can layer on additional challenges. This progressive approach allows you to build momentum and confidence while avoiding the overwhelm that often derails ambitious change efforts. What gets measured gets managed, and successful long-term integration requires some form of tracking and measurement. This doesn't mean obsessively monitoring every detail of your life, but it does mean having objective ways to assess your progress and identify patterns. Consider tracking key metrics that reflect your dopamine health and mental resilience. This might include your ability to focus on important tasks, your energy levels throughout the day, your mood and emotional stability, your sleep quality, or your consistency with chosen practices. Simple tracking methods are often more sustainable than complex systems. You might use a basic habit tracker, keep a brief daily journal, or simply rate your overall satisfaction and energy each day on a scale of 1 to 10. The goal isn't perfect scores or constant improvement, but rather awareness of patterns and trends. This data helps you identify what's working, what isn't, and how external factors affect your progress. Setbacks are not failures. They're an inevitable part of any meaningful change process. Your brain's default is to return to familiar patterns, especially during times of stress, fatigue, or emotional challenge. Expecting and planning for setbacks makes them much easier to handle when they occur. The most important skill is what researchers call psychological flexibility, the ability to notice when you've gotten off track without judging yourself harshly, and to quickly return to beneficial behaviors without dramatic self-correction attempts. When you do experience a setback, focus on getting back on track as quickly as possible, rather than trying to compensate with extreme measures. If you skip your morning routine one day, simply resume it the next day, rather than trying to do twice as much to make up for the missed day. View setbacks as information rather than evidence of failure. What circumstances led to the setback? What was different about your environment, stress level, or decision-making process? How can you adjust your systems to make success more likely in similar situations? Long-term success is much more likely when you have social support for your goals and changes. This might mean finding others who are also working on similar improvements, sharing your goals with friends and family, or joining communities focused on growth and self-improvement. However, be selective about who you share your goals with and how you discuss them. Not everyone will understand or support your efforts to choose difficulty over ease or to limit instant gratification behaviors. Some people might even actively discourage your changes if they threaten their own comfort or habits. Seek out people who are already living in ways you admire, who challenge you to grow, and who provide honest feedback and accountability. These relationships become incredibly valuable resources for maintaining motivation and gaining perspective during challenging periods. Your environment will need to evolve as you change and grow. What supports you at the beginning of your journey might need adjustment as you develop new capabilities and face new challenges. Regularly assess your physical environment, digital environment, and social environment to ensure they're still supporting your goals. This might mean removing new temptations that have crept in, adjusting your daily routines as your schedule changes, or finding new sources of challenge as previous ones become easier. Think of your environment as a tool that needs regular maintenance and updates. Just as you wouldn't expect a tool to work optimally without care, your environment needs attention to continue supporting your growth. As you develop greater mental resilience and dopamine sensitivity, you'll likely find yourself capable of pursuing larger and more meaningful goals. This evolution requires more sophisticated approaches to goal setting and achievement. Focus on process goals rather than outcome goals. Instead of lose 20 pounds, focus on exercise 5 days per week. Instead of write a book, focus on write for 30 minutes each morning. Process goals are within your direct control and provide daily opportunities for success and satisfaction. Also, consider what researchers call approach goals rather than avoidance goals. Instead of stop wasting time on social media, focus on spend 2 hours daily on creative projects. Approach goals give you something positive to move toward rather than just something negative to avoid. Set goals that stretch your capabilities without overwhelming your current capacity. The sweet spot is goals that feel challenging but achievable with consistent effort over time. The field of neuroscience and psychology continues to evolve, and new insights about dopamine, motivation, and behavior change emerge regularly. Maintaining a learning mindset keeps you open to new approaches and prevents your practices from becoming rigid or outdated. This might mean reading new research, experimenting with different techniques, or adjusting your approach based on changes in your life circumstances or goals. The principles remain constant. Voluntary discomfort builds resilience. Delayed gratification creates deeper satisfaction, and meaning trumps pleasure for long-term fulfillment. But the specific applications of these principles can evolve as you grow and as new understanding emerges. Perhaps the most powerful motivation for long-term success is understanding that your personal development affects not just you, but everyone around you. Your increased resilience, focus, and authentic satisfaction become resources that benefit your family, friends, community, and work. When you embody the principles of optimal living, you become a model for others who are struggling with similar challenges. Your example gives them permission to choose difficulty over ease, growth over comfort, and meaning over momentary pleasure. This ripple effect extends far beyond what you might imagine. The person who develops genuine resilience and self-discipline becomes a source of stability and strength for others during difficult times. The person who finds satisfaction in meaningful work rather than consumption creates value that benefits their entire community. Consider how your personal growth serves not just your own goals, but contributes to the larger project of human flourishing. This perspective transforms personal development from a selfish pursuit into a form of service to something greater than yourself. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this exploration of dopamine detox and pain training. From the basic neuroscience of reward systems to advanced optimization strategies. From the philosophy of optimal living to practical integration techniques. You now have a comprehensive understanding of how to reclaim control over your motivation, focus, and happiness. But understanding is just the beginning. The real transformation happens through consistent application of these principles in your daily life. It happens through choosing the cold shower when your brain wants warmth, through focusing on important work when your brain craves distraction, through engaging in meaningful relationships when your brain seeks digital validation. Each time you make these choices, you're literally rewiring your brain to find reward in growth rather than consumption, in presence rather than distraction, in meaning rather than pleasure. You're becoming someone who can thrive in any circumstance, because your satisfaction comes from within rather than from external conditions. The journey isn't always easy, but it's profoundly rewarding. As you develop genuine resilience and reset your reward system, you'll discover capabilities you didn't know you had. You'll find satisfaction in activities that used to feel impossible. You'll develop the kind of inner strength that allows you to pursue meaningful goals, regardless of how you feel in any given moment. Most importantly, you'll remember what it feels like to be fully human, to be someone who can choose their response to any situation, who can delay gratification in service of larger goals, and who finds deep satisfaction in the process of becoming their best self. The modern world will continue to offer easy pleasures and instant gratification. Technology will become more sophisticated at capturing your attention and hijacking your reward system. But you now have the knowledge and tools to navigate this environment consciously, using its benefits while protecting yourself from its harms. You have the power to choose difficulty over ease, growth over comfort, and meaning over momentary pleasure. You have the capacity to build unshakable resilience, authentic satisfaction, and genuine achievement. The question isn't whether you can do this. You absolutely can. The question is whether you will choose to do it consistently, over time, even when it's challenging. That choice is yours to make, moment by moment, day by day. And with each choice to embrace difficulty and delayed gratification, you're not just improving your own life. You're contributing to a culture that values growth over consumption, resilience over fragility, and human potential over artificial stimulation.